Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It is Sunday, the 16th of February. You don't even know what day it is up here. Like, it doesn't feel like a Sunday. And it's 4:18 p.m. my time, which is Central Time. And I'm going to do a podcast. Tinker with my... Yeah, there we go. That'll turn out fine. I'm going to do a podcast today, and I'm in my official man cave, which was originally our bodega, our storage room. And I'm going to get it all repainted and everything, but it's just, I love being in here, right? Because it's a self-enclosed building. It's like a hobbit house. And it's quite nice. Bob arrived last night. Nice to have him here. My son's still here, so they're having some very interesting conversations, as everybody who meets Bob does. And it's very nice up here. Rosemary and I are getting ready for our little viaje, our voyage. That's going to be a lot of fun. There's not many husbands who get to take their 51-year-old wives on their first plane ride, but such is the case with me. So I'm looking forward to that. Today I want to build on the last podcast, It's Other Human Beings. I want to talk about the Trump administration. And I want to talk about the invisible forces governing this planet and what's going on now. Most of what we're up against now is human. It was not always so in the past. I don't know why things work out this way. I don't understand the timing the way other people do. To my sensibilities, that's more the province of astrologers and people involved in the various occult sciences related to time and happening, which are valid and not negatively influenced. I mean, the astrology is just astrology, right? And of course it's real. For anyone who thinks it isn't real, of course it's real, because there's nothing here without purpose, and the solar system is supposed to tell us something. The solar system in many ways represents our astral bodies. Okay? The galaxy represents our causal body, and the universe represents our mental body, and as soul we go outside of everything. It's the final sheath. So there's a lot to accomplish in a lifetime, and most people just sort of work at it but never finish it. That's certainly the case, will probably be my case. And I would like to be of some service to other people while I'm making my journey, sort of become a cartographer of sort, explain the cosmology as it's unfolded to me in my amateur investigations, I guess. I don't know if there's anything, such a thing as a professional investigation into life and meaning. Maybe a professional philosopher. Now, the first thing that has to be pointed out is how close we came with Harrison Waltz to what I would consider a first world catastrophe. That may sound strange to some people who are now witnessing what DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, and the Trump administration are now doing. And it's unfortunate that we have to fight each other, going back to the Facebook fight. Lovely woman I was in the Facebook fight with as well. I think she's late 60s, early 70s, about a decade, 12 years older than me. And just a lovely human being. We agree on almost everything, but I don't think there's a lot of disagreement going on right now. I think that the disagreement is manufactured. And it has to do with phony context. Again, I go back again and again and again to the same things, this phony context that we live in. The entire context we live in is phony. And that's been done deliberately. You're all familiar with the William Casey quote. I put it in The Devil in Us. He said it in 1981 when he was director of the CIA. I'm not sure where it was recorded or how it made it into the public space. That would be an interesting little research exercise now that I think about it. But what he said was, we will know our job is done, and our is the intelligence agency, and I would say probably agencies, with the CIA being at the top of them all. We'll know our job is done when everything the American public believes is wrong. That's a lot to take in, especially from a salaried civil servant whose job it is to protect Americans from threats outside of America. When people say, and I read it on the daily now in social media, when people say that what Trump and Musk and this administration is doing is illegal, and that includes elected officials like Maxine Waters, like Bernie Sanders, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and others, too numerous to list here. What they're revealing is their own ignorance. Just because they're elected officials doesn't mean they have a better grasp on what's going on than you or me. And that includes people who were once in the intelligence services, like the Central Intelligence Agency, and have now become public figures, like our friend at Everyday Spy, Andrew Bustamante. He's just an idiot, okay? Or if he knows and he's lying, God forgive him, because that's a serious thing to mislead people on. And I don't think he's that bad, so I'm leaning towards ignorance. But when a former CIA gets onto major podcasts with millions of subscribers and says things like it's a conspiracy theory that the CIA is involved in human trafficking, that's a complete lie. Now, he may have been, there may be divisions of the CIA that operate just like a Tom Clancy novel, and they may not know. But I assure you, there are dimensions and subgroups within the CIA that are completely connected to this commiseration with negative interdimensionals, which they are calling Satanism, which is ridiculous, and all of the things that these people want. And when you see these appetites like the pedophilia and stuff like that, that is generally because you're witnessing somebody who's either lost dominion over their own body and consciousness. They're either, I don't want to say possessed, because I think even the old language is tainted. It's so simple. Possessed, not possessed, as the Catholics tell us. It's just, we need a whole new language model to cope with what's going on this planet. Nobody's updating the language. There are many people now who are operating with what I would call hybridized consciousness. That means that the consciousness that was born into the body for the human life experience, consensually or through a series of power grabs in their own desire framework, ended up becoming occupied or cohabitated with another consciousness. And that consciousness sort of melds into yours. And you effectively then have a hybridized individual. Okay? The interdimensionals love to do this. those interdimensionals that were described in The Light of Darkness, which is, I think, the best description of the interdimensionals you're ever going to get. I give them a very good going over in the Uniform Control podcast. So it's the black fedora, the black suit. Okay? That's the uniform. The rabbi, the Jesuit, the men in black. Their time is finished on this planet. They don't know it yet because they're in context collapse now. Because the positive waves of energy that are uplifting us all are a torment to these people. They like the world the way it was. They like the world where they had the power, they had all the asses to sodomize, they had all the children to sexually abuse and murder and rob of, let's call it a psycho-spiritual energy. Okay? Chi, prana, whatever you want to call it. You don't have to study yoga or qigong for 40 years to get that energy. You can steal it from other human beings, and children are the best and easiest people to steal it from. This is the ugly truth of what's been going on this planet. And from everything I've seen so far in the Trump administration, I'm behind them 100%. And I believe they're sincere in their war against these forces. And I would go even so far as to say that there are factions within even the interdimensionals affecting us, minus the black-suited ones, which might be some form of government cryptid, I don't know. But I would say at this point in history, there are even factions amongst the reptilians who are saying no more abusing the humans. We want to grow too. We want to go back to source. We want to feel the touch of our creator, because it's the same creator for everybody. Different gods, and when you start thinking about gods, think about some entity living between matter and spirit that's been there millions of years, all powerful, knows everything, but is disconnected from source in the sense of a negative God, connected to source in the sense of a bridge between the infinite and the growing emerging human consciousness, which I would say is the case with the Hindu gods. The Hindu gods are bridges. They're bridges to the infinite, because the infinite is so unbelievably difficult to comprehend, and it doesn't have any interfaces human beings can relate to, which is why the benign gods were created. But there are things out there in this space between matter and spirit that many human beings might call God or a God, that do not act in the benefit of human beings and are actually siphoning energy. Now, a clever human being who wants all their desires fulfilled would enter into a relationship with an entity like this and not feed their own energy to it, but feed the energy of other human beings to it. And then get the benefit of that God's wisdom, knowledge, and foresight. Foresight being the ability to predict the future. Because everything outside of the physical form knows what's coming in the human future. Your dead grandparents on the other side know what's coming in the human future, because there are no blocks or sequence on the other side. It's all sort of jumbled together. You see how it all works? I like Elon Musk so far. Now, the people who are saying that he or Trump may be prototypes for the Antichrist, I don't think they know what they're talking about, nor do I even think that that scripture is valid. Remember my philosophy on the scriptures. I would chuck everything out the window, including Muhammad. Okay? Including Muhammad. No offense, Muslims. And I have said on air before that if I had to choose one of the three religions, I would choose Islam, just because I think it's the religion least infected by evil. And I've said before, and I find it necessary to repeat myself, don't throw those ignorant Pakistanis or Afghanis in my face, okay? Or the terror cells being paid for by Iran or Saudi Arabia, whether they be Shia or Sunni, okay? I would throw everything out the window in all of those scriptures except the words of the Christ captured in the Gospels. Not the story itself even, not even the crucifixion or what happened to him described by third parties, but just the words of the Christ. Okay, that's it. If you can live by those words, and may God help you, because it is incredibly difficult to live by those words. It's basically putting everything ahead of you. Okay? How many people do you know who actually live that way? Most Christians now, and I'd say a lot of the Christians associated with the Trump administration, are not real Christians. They're immersed in prosperity doctrine. They think they're going to, become wealthy, right? What is wealth, right? How did people become wealthy in the past? How did King Solomon become wealthy? Mining gold, emeralds, diamonds from the earth. That earth is the dowry of all of us. In the modern equation, people become wealthy by manipulating the money system. Nobody really gets wealthy anymore doing the right thing or creating or inventing something. You can say, well, hey, Bruce, what about the example of Bill Gates? Well, Bill Gates' genius was his ability to get government contracts. Governments should have moved over to Linux desktops in the office, open source software, 20 years ago. In 2005, it was ready. I think France did. They went all of their offices went to Red Hat Linux. All you'd need is one IT guy who could plug up all the security holes in the network, and you're good to go. But there was a deal made, and there were probably kickbacks paid, and this nightmare we call Microsoft Windows proliferated itself to the whole world. If I'm right about the Trump administration, and there's no guarantee that I am, actually, to be honest with you, but there's a high probability that I am, but no guarantee. We're moving in the right direction. And this is a direction so necessary for human beings to achieve our growth potential that I would be willing to go down to 500 living couples who could procreate and restart the human race, as long as that human race was restarted in the absence of these controlling interdimensionals and these negative beings that live with us in the inner earth and coming in from other dimensions. And remember, universal law is just that. It's universal, meaning that the interdimensionals don't violate the universal law. But for them to enter into a consent contract with a human being is like a 50-year-old person talking to a 5-year-old. It's not too hard to manipulate the 5-year-old, is it? Because they're much smarter than us. This human race was not created for astounding feats of thinking. That's why we don't have the skinny neck and the big eyes like the gray aliens or the Zeta Reticulans or any of this stuff. We were created as a feeling species, okay? Our heart center. We were created as a species that might be able to show the rest of the universe the way back to harmony with the Creator. Because a lot of these so-called superior races are actually not in harmony with the Creator, or they've lost the ability to go further in their relationship with the Creator. And everything in creation is magnetically drawn to the Creator. Everything is going back to the Creator. Just like the ocean being pulled out by the gravity of the moon. Okay, we're all being pulled toward the Creator. And the suffering we have in our life is created by ourselves by blocking that. Sweetie, I'm doing a podcast, okay? I can't have you in here. Come on, sweetie. Come on, you gotta go. I can't have you in here. Come on, baby. Good girl. My Lulu. She's a good girl. Bit impulsive because one of my nieces had her, and she's like her personality. She spent her first year of life with one of my nieces, but they had a lot of dogs on their property, and this dog was attacking the other dogs, so they asked us to take it. And I think that the first 6 months you have with a dog are very important, or the first year you have with a dog for forming the personality. Where was I? What was I talking about? Let's see if I can remember. So yeah, I think we're headed in the right direction. Believe me when I tell you, the technology doesn't matter. It's nice to have. I like talking to you on this iPhone camera and this Blue Yeti microphone and my Mac M4 computer and my Starlink satellite. It's not like I'm a Luddite. It's not that I live without technology. It can be incorporated into a balanced life. Okay? Have you ever stopped to think how much of what we're being told is an incidental criticism of the human race? Like, why do we need a brain chip? Well, to be smarter. Why? Are we not exactly as smart as we need to be as by our Creator's dictates? You know, is there something wrong here? Maybe a little bit more time feeling and a little less time thinking is what we need. And technology in this direction we're in now, I'm not sure it's the right direction to go in. There's no stopping now. Because the way they've set up the game here, though, if you don't do it, somebody else will. So we have to go down this technology route, because if we don't do it, China or India are going to do it. And this is the way they move everything forward. I remember being in my early 20s in journalism school and having these arguments with my old man at the dinner table at Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter when I would go from Toronto to Ottawa, and he was pushing free trade, and I'm going, this is a bad idea. And he'd go, oh, you don't understand, Bruce. You know, if we have to go this direction. Japan is forming trading blocks in the eastern region. And if we don't form trading blocks and bring in free trade among select countries, we're not going to be able to compete with them, because there's this thing called economy of scale in economics, and they're going to be able to produce cheaper and sell cheaper, and they'll wipe us out of the market. And when you hear that, you go, hey, yeah, that makes sense, you know. But the problem with being an intuitive person is that you know something's wrong, but you can't really make the argument. You just know, right? And so thought trumps feeling. And this is what's been going on the whole 20th century, the whole time period of The Devil in Us, A Memoir of You and Me. This is basically what's been going on, is that, thought trumps feeling. And we're made to feel ridiculous because we have feelings. And I always go back to some critical examples, like Henry, and people, you can see the people who have fully committed spiritually to this thinking as a modality of life. Okay? It's people like Henry Kissinger and Madeleine Albright and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. Although a lot of them I don't think really believe it. They've just been bought out or they're compromised. But amidst that group, there are true believers. And I'd say Kissinger and Madeleine Albright were true believers. The feeling I get knowing that 500,000 children died under U.S. sanctions between 1992 and 2003 in the country of Iraq under Saddam Hussein is a horrible feeling. And no amount of geopolitical gains we've made, according to Madeleine Albright, justify that. Okay? And it turns out, with hindsight, as anybody of intelligence who knows the area and has experience will tell you, the area was better off with Saddam Hussein, because he was the only one that was able to balance the forces in that country, the Shia and the Sunni. Okay? and it required a strong hand, and he brought a strong hand to it. It's not for us from our comfortable recliners and air-conditioned homes in Ohio or Ontario to be telling Saddam Hussein how to run his country. Okay? But anyways, we replaced that regime for Israel. But I think that the Zionists are more than just Jews, and I think it's a geopolitical ambition to control the Middle East. And a lot of the Masons are in on it too, because they're all really sort of greedy and self-centered, these people who study ritual magic. Like, nothing good comes out of it. It's like buying a gun. Why would you buy a gun if you're never going to shoot it? Why would you learn ritual magic if you're never going to use it to your benefit? Always be wary of people who are attracted to these things, right? It's just the same story over and over and over again, and it never gets any better. Now I'm going to get a little bit more on track, and I'm going to try to explain to you how close we came to a catastrophe. So, those of you who know a little bit about history, you might know about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which was a communist revolution, which killed millions of people. You might know about the Cultural Revolution in the 60s in China, which killed millions of people. That and the various policies of the centralist government, the Great Leap Forward, they killed tens of millions of people in China and tens of millions of people in Russia and the Ukraine. And when you study those movements, you see the same ideology over and over again. Okay? And ideology is a kind of demonic language, by the way. The language of the demonic world is ideological. Okay? So ideologies are communication strategies for dark forces. Now, it could be the interdimensionals as well. But in this particular instance, I think it was the demons. Yeah, and these ideologies present such a forceful intellectual argument that people become so compelled by them that they don't allow any more feeling into the way they think. And that's the reason that these communist purges are so brutal. And they almost always involve the inner circle of the leaders too. Half of them kill the other half. It's always violence. It's always murder. And very often they do it the same way. They do it by beginning to nurture a generation, the new generation. They start to nurture them in the school system. They start to nurture them in various communal ways, however they do that. It could be well, let's just say the school system and various activities. I mean, Hitler was another one too, like the Hitler Youth. You've got the Maoist Red Guard is one of the classic examples in China, in which Mao gave the young people, like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, permission to form into militias, to enter people's homes without any writ from a court or any public authority, and to severely chastise or murder people who it was found were contravening the Communist Party's ideologies demonstrated by artifacts found in the home. Okay? And the Bolshevik Revolution was the same. And they always go after religious people. Religious people are extremely dangerous to these ideological movements because religious movements are more feeling-based. And ideological movements are rational and thought-based. Okay, I shouldn't say that they're rational. I think for full rationality to be present, that human beings would have to incorporate some of their feeling as well for it to be rational. Let me get back onto the Zoom here. There we go. Yeah. So I think for them to be rational, they'd have to have a little bit of feeling. It's amazing how little time we spend with our feelings now as human beings, our real feelings. I would say my deepest feeling comes in spiritual practice. And then there's another thing that's quite curious that's going on with what I would call the spectrum of feeling, is that so much of our feeling has been rendered sentimental. And there's another word that people don't usually use correctly. It's amazing how often people get the word sentimental wrong, right? So very often they just kind of get it wrong. So as the great poet Wallace Stevens said, sentiment is actually a failure to feel. Okay? So it's an abrogation of the feeling by a concept of feeling. And it is really one of the foundations of mind control. So you have a concept of a feeling. So most people, their concept of their feeling of romance, it doesn't come in their real life. It comes through TV shows. Why do you think daytime TV was all soap operas when women stayed home? It was a form of programming. And it was also an adjunct to the feminist agenda, which was to destroy the family. Because communal thinkers, people caught up in this ideology, are always trying to do this. It's what they're always trying to do. Now, why do I keep saying this, that we narrowly escaped a communist revolution? Well, look at all the stuff. It's not that hard to see, okay? You've got Kamala Harris literally quoting Marx again and again on the campaign trail. Unburdened by what has been so that we can bring forward what is to be, okay? That's a euphemism for mass murder. If you can't make the cut and unburden yourself from the past and the habits of living of the past, you get killed. In the Soviet system, you got sent to a gulag. In the Chinese system, you either got sent to a work farm and they worked you to death, or they just killed you on the spot, bullet to the head. Okay? Very, very brutal, these systems. And they always begin with youth. Now, where do we see this now? Okay, what do you think's going on with this transgender movement? They're trying to drive a wedge between generations. It's patently obvious. It's not that hard to see at all. And all of these kids are thinking differently. And if you don't think the way they think, they get angry. Look at some of the reactions you can see on X now. You know, some of the freakouts you're seeing. Okay? And people, and in my estimation, all Trump is doing is bringing America back to a more balanced center, where to survive, you have to be self-responsible. You can't be dependent on your government. Is it to his detriment that we've just spent 50 years, more, I'd say, 55 years from about 1970 onwards, convincing people of the exact opposite? The idea is going even further in Canada. Okay? I've said it before on the Talamanca Review, and I'll say it again. We were in a program to slowly kill us over generations. Okay? This was a communist revolution, but the way they were doing it was much more slow and very difficult to pick up on. Okay? And, I mean, to her credit, Kamala Harris let the cat out of the bag with that unburdened by the past stuff, which, by the way, is right out of the Communist Manifesto. Okay? And appealing to the new generation, and you've got all of these, like, socialist-minded, communist-leading kids in the universities, and communism never works. And the reason it never works is people are too selfish for it right now. You know how communism might work? It might work if they released zero energy, okay? And everybody had their own little homestead and they had their own free energy that was just a box the size of a soccer ball. And everybody could power their houses, charge their cars, and do everything they needed to do. And your basic sovereignty and sanctity as an individual was guaranteed. From there, you may be able to form a communal collective, okay? But until a society has spiritual practice in it, you're not going to have any peace in that society. Because we are spiritual beings having a material experience. And if the material experience is not in some measure directed towards the growth of us as spiritual beings while we're in the body, the society is going to go off track. People are going to get crazier and crazier and crazier. And there's only so many ways that you can mask that. Okay? And they were trying very, very hard to mask it. Okay? This is what the pharmaceuticals were doing. If you're living in a crazy circumstance and you go crazy, going crazy is normal because you're adapting to your environment. And then rather than admit the environment and the ideological soup that we're living in is crazy, we treat people with pharmaceuticals and we diagnose them with mental ailments that don't really exist. By the way, this was a Soviet tactic. You know, the Soviets used psychiatry as a state weapon. The psychiatrists were all party members, and you were considered mentally ill if you did not agree with what Moscow said. And mental illness and the treatment of mental illness in the Soviet Union was absolutely barbaric. Okay? You'd be thrown in a mental asylum, electroshock therapy, just everything, right? Just absolutely barbaric. And this was normal. Okay? And at the beginning of a communist revolution, there's a tremendous amount of deception. It very much follows the motto of the Mossad, which is war by deception. So very often at the beginning of a communist revolution, the society, the people pushing for quietly, clandestinely, pushing for the communist revolution will introduce more and more decadence into the society. Okay? And then when the society is sufficiently weakened by the decadence and the communists can take over, once the communists take over, all of the decadence goes away. Communism does not tolerate homosexuality. The Soviet Union didn't really tolerate homosexuality. The Chinese, for the most part, leave it alone, but they don't celebrate it. I don't think there are any pride parades in China. There are no pride parades in India. There are no pride parades in the Middle East. As far as I know, there are no pride parades in Africa. There you go. Those are all the major civilizations on the planet. Why is Western culture the only culture beginning in really in the 90s, okay? Right up until the late 80s in North America, I know in Toronto, cops were raiding gay bathhouses and cracking skulls with wooden batons, you know? So why suddenly relax all the regulations on sexual conduct? Because they know that's how you destroy a society. Okay? And then once the society is destroyed, the communists take over. This is why the Democrats and Justin Trudeau in Canada spend more than the country earns. They're trying to achieve a state of debt that basically creates insolvency, and the solution to that insolvency is go to a communist model. Okay? And this is all planned, it's all deliberate. Klaus Schwab, Yuval Noah Harari, those are varying forms or shades of communism, which are just shades of gray, by the way. And by the way, gray as a color has more shades to it than any other color in the light spectrum. Isn't that interesting? Perhaps it's because it's a combination of the two base polarities of color, which is everything which is black and nothing which is white. So it stands to reason that gray would have the most shades. And that's how they do it. And when you look back now and you look at what was going on under Biden and what is still going on under Trudeau. So Trudeau's going to try and fight Trump, which is the stupidest thing ever, because he's going to further create suffering in the lives of Canadians. More suffering in the lives of Canadians. He's going to further devalue that society, devalue the dollar, and demoralize the population, which is what he's been doing for a decade. He is completely insane. He should be taken out of power at the very least. And I honestly believe that he should be a suitable candidate for execution for treason. And I'm not even joking. Okay? If people understood what that creature is, the way I understand what that creature is, they would string him up by the neck and hang him until he was dead. But they don't see it, because they always present well, these people. It's the same thing with Gavin Newsom. You know, very tall, handsome, chiseled features, very attractive to the younger generation, smooth speakers, but they never say anything. When you listen to them closely, they never say anything. I went over this in a previous podcast. I played a clip of Gavin Newsom talking about how California is going to rebuild after the fire. You can't get a single thing out of him. The interviewer, in a 3-minute interview, she asks him 3 times, and she cannot nail him down. He just speaks this system speak, egresses, regresses, policy, regulation, and by the time he's done talking, you don't have a clue what the guy said. They do that on purpose. Trudeau's a master of it. Okay? There's nothing substantive in what he says. And the only people who support people like this are people who've taken the deep dive into the experimental life of decadence and imbalance, whether it be transgenderism, radical homosexuality, or the desire to make homosexual policy the norm in your society, like having a sexual ed curriculum in your grade schools that begins teaching kids about sodomy in grade 1. Why are they doing that? So there's more asses to fuck, because homosexuality is generally about, in its natural form, without any stimulation, is about 1% of the population. Okay? And that's not a large field of people for sexual activity. And it's also, the old maxim, misery loves company. Okay? So they want to bring other people into their torment. And believe me when I tell you, the gay life is a tormented life. You're not going to find too many happy and balanced gay people in their 60s and 70s and 80s if they live that long. Because none of the equity that creates a happy end life, which is the generations you've produced around you, is present, and all of their virility is gone, and they've lived mainly through their sexuality, and more importantly, the ideology that their sexuality produced. And you see this again and again and again, whether it be Catherine Wynne when she was Premier of the province of Ontario, or whether it's Beetlejuice as the mayor of Chicago. When you study their policies closely, they're involved in the destruction of normative society. Now, the irony is that when the communists finally take over, those degenerates are the first people they kill. Study your history. These people are used. They're told that they're part of a revolutionary movement because so much of the misery, and you should, when you get into the gay intelligentsia, the gay ideology, it is amazing the way these people think. Basically, everybody's gay, we're not admitting it, and if we all fucked each other and we were all bisexual, it would be a much better world. And have sex with children. Basically, our repressed sexual impulses are the cause of all misery in human existence. This is the gay ideology. Okay? It's, and again, it's stimulated by people who are looking to destroy the society. And then once the country is destroyed, and the promoters of the ideology, the people who seeded the people like Beetlejuice and the former Premier of Ontario, they come in, take power, and they kill all the other people, the people that they use to get to where they are. Do you know that in the former Soviet Union, if you were simply caught masturbating, you could be sent to a mental institution? Masturbation was considered symptomatic of mental illness in the Soviet Union. Okay? So we're not out of the woods yet, because all of these commies involved with the WEF are still trying to fight, and they're going to try and take down Trump, and they don't realize, and they're all destroying their own countries, whether it be Italy, although under Maloney, Italy has turned around a fair bit. Germany is destroying itself. I think Sweden's finally seen the light now. There's massive demonstrations against the excessive immigration. But so many European countries have been nearly destroyed now. And these policies were all brought in intentionally. And why? Because you cannot control the world without destroying the West. Because we are the freest peoples who have ever lived. And much of that freedom was borrowed from my hereditary culture, which was the Celtic culture, which was always egalitarian, didn't have really elected leaders. Do you know that the idea of a land registry was created by the Scots? And all it meant was, if you found 10 acres, you cleaned it and you fenced it, and every year you submitted a note and saying, yeah, I'm still working this land, it was deemed your land and it would be publicly defended if anybody tried to take it away from you. And there were no taxes. It was just simply your land. So the idea of the deed and the lot and all of the principles of land property we have now, it all comes from the Scots. Okay? When the Romans got there, they were baffled because they said, well, we can't see any visible leadership, because there was a tribal synergy in the consciousness of the Celts, the Irish, the Scots, and the Welsh. It was like a tribal synergy. And this was an affectation of our religion in the past, which was Druidism. And that was all destroyed, okay, to fit us into this modern papal work schedule, this modern work camp. And it's a work camp, whether you're in the capitalist version of it or the communist version of it. Until you go off and build your own life, you're still imprisoned, okay? And if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that the things keeping you attached to it are all things that are not really that good for you. All like sort of negative desires, right? So had Harris and Waltz gotten in, we would have been in so much trouble. Nobody would have been in a position to stop Trudeau, and I think Trump has to stop Trudeau. And I'm not being unpatriotic as a Canadian when I say that. Trudeau is evil. And if you don't see that, I can't help you. If you see him as this shining optimist and a great leader, there is something seriously wrong with your perception. You are not perceiving correctly. And I can't help you with that. There's no medicine for that. You've been brainwashed. You've been compromised by all the conceptual feeling, all the sentiment you've taken in through social media, and all of the nonsensical ideology, as Santos says, the weaponized empathy, as Jordan Maxwell says, the virtue signaling. These people are not empathetic, and they are not virtuous. Okay? The people coming into power now are closer to being virtuous and empathetic. And so what are we being told now? It's a fascist takeover. Trump and his billionaire buddies are taking over the country. You have elected officials now standing in front of microphones saying they're robbing your Social Security. Now, in the case, Maxine Waters, Bernie Sanders, I've been over this before. Maxine Waters may literally be that stupid. I think she's functioning at like an 82 IQ. I mean,
I think if she got tested, she might qualify as Down syndrome. And I'm not even joking, okay? I'm not trying to be racist. I believe a black renaissance is coming. I believe there's a tremendous untapped intelligence in the black race. And I believe we're going into a black renaissance in terms of racial karma. That's just my feeling. Maxine Waters is an idiot, okay? Elizabeth Warren is an idiot. Okay? These are people who've made political careers by giving our money to people who don't deserve it because they can't work, they can't stand up, they've made bad life decisions and they don't want to accept the consequences of their life decisions. So government's there to bail them out. And why? Because it's a cheap vote, it's a free vote to buy because they're buying that vote with our money, right? I've even seen people talking on social media now about how the far right in the Project 2025 and the Trump administration want to take the vote away from women and just make the head of a household the voter for the whole family. I don't know if that's true. I would be very surprised if the Trump administration made moves in that direction. But I don't think everybody should be able to vote. I think you should have to register with valid identification. You know, people are so afraid of this digital ID. Do you know how much good you could do with digital ID? You could set things up online so that people could be properly identified, and you could set up a test that people have to take to have the right to vote. There should be like a basic competency test to vote. You know, do you understand the issues? Do you understand what debt is? Do you understand the basics of economics? You don't have to have an economics degree, but there should be a basic test to vote. So I think that not everybody should have the vote because it has completely corrupted our politicians and produced people that just habitually lie. Anyways, these are the ramblings of a man relaxing on Sunday, which is going to be the title of this podcast. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.